The Galactic Council, a vast coalition of 317 spacefaring species from across the known universe, gathered in their enormous crystalline chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime. The council chamber hummed with the voices of hundreds of different species, some speaking through translators, others communicating via color-changing skin or pheromone bursts. High Chancellor Vortic, a 12-foot-tall being with iridescent scales and 6 eyes, raised all 4 of his arms for silence. The chamber gradually grew quiet. "The vote has been cast," Vortic announced, his voice deep and resonant. "With 276 in favor, 41 against, the Galactic Council hereby declares formal war against the species known as humans from the planet designated Sol 3, or as they call it, Earth." A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. Most species had never encountered humans directly but had heard disturbing reports about these bizarre beings who lived on a toxic death world and seemed to survive conditions that would kill most sentient life. Meanwhile, on Earth, it was just another Tuesday morning. Frank Collins yawned as he adjusted his headphones in the NASA Deep Space Communications Center in Houston. He had been on shift for 6 hours already, monitoring the usual background noise from the various probes and satellites. The coffee in his mug had gone cold, and he was thinking about lunch when an unusual signal pattern caught his attention. "That's weird," he muttered, fingers flying across his keyboard. The signal was coming from far beyond any human installation, yet it was clearly directed at Earth and encoded in a mathematical pattern that suggested intelligence. Frank's heart raced as he began the standard first contact protocols. This could be the moment everyone at NASA had dreamed about for decades. He alerted his supervisor, who called the director, who contacted the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who woke up the president. Within 2 hours, a team of cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists were working to decode the message. It took them less than a day. "You've got to be kidding me," said Dr. Karen Wilson, lead linguist on the project. "They're declaring war on us." President Olivia Martinez received the news in the Oval Office, surrounded by her national security team. Unlike the movies, there was no immediate panic, no dramatic music, just a group of confused government officials staring at each other. "Let me get this straight," the president said, rubbing her temples. "Some alien coalition we've never heard of, from a place we've never been to, is declaring war on Earth. Do they say why?" "Something about us being an abomination that defies the natural order," General Ben Taylor said, reading from the report. "Apparently, we live on what they consider a death world, and our biology shouldn't be possible." President Martinez sighed. "Assemble a task force. Keep this quiet for now. The last thing we need is panic. But let's figure out if this is a real threat or some kind of cosmic misunderstanding." As the government began its quiet preparations, life on Earth continued normally. In Chicago, Nurse Steve Johnson helped deliver a baby. In Seattle, teacher Diane Miller explained photosynthesis to 34th graders. In Mumbai, software developer Raj Patel fixed a bug that had been annoying him for days. None of them knew that far above their heads, at the edge of the solar system, the first ships of the Galactic Council's war fleet were beginning to arrive. The ships were massive, elegant constructions of unknown metals and energy fields, built by civilizations thousands of years more advanced than humanity. Their commanders were confident this would be a quick war. After all, what could a single primitive species possibly do against the combined might of 317 advanced civilizations? They had no idea that their greatest mistake was assuming humans would react like any other species. They were about to learn that declaring war on humanity was easy. Getting humanity to notice or care was going to be much harder. The United Nations Security Council convened in an emergency session at 3 a.m. New York time. Diplomats from all member nations looked tired and confused as they filed into the chamber, many still in casual clothes or hastily thrown-on suits. "Ladies and gentlemen," began UN Secretary General Luis Ortega, "what I am about to share will sound unbelievable, but I assure you it has been verified by multiple intelligence agencies." He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "Earth has received a formal declaration of war from an organization calling itself the Galactic Council." The room erupted in a mix of nervous laughter and concerned murmurs. "Is this some kind of joke?" asked the Russian ambassador. "I wish it were," replied Ortega. "NASA has confirmed the transmission came from beyond our solar system. The message has been translated and verified as authentic." Back at the Pentagon, military analyst Maria Johnson worked through the night, studying the decoded parts of the alien message. She was a veteran intelligence officer who had seen many crises, but nothing like this. "I think I found their main grievance," she said to her team, pointing at her screen. "They're calling us death world aberrations and biological impossibilities. According to their standards, Earth should be uninhabitable." Her colleague Jack Powell scratched his head. "They're mad at us for existing." "Basically," Maria nodded. "They seem genuinely disturbed that we can survive in what they consider extreme conditions. Our radiation levels, atmospheric composition, gravity, temperature variations." Meanwhile, aboard the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Daniel Wright noticed something unusual during his routine observation duties. Several objects, larger than any satellite but smaller than the Moon, had appeared near Mars' orbit. They seemed to be stationary, as if waiting. "Houston, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" he radioed down. On Earth, the news of the war declaration had begun to leak onto social media, but most people treated it as an elaborate hoax or marketing campaign for a new sci-fi movie. Hashtags like #FakeAlienWar and #GalacticPrank were trending worldwide. In a coffee shop in Portland, barista Amy Foster served customers while a news report about the alleged alien message played on the TV in the corner. "Can you believe this alien stuff?" she asked a regular customer. "Probably viral marketing," he replied with a shrug. "Maybe for that new streaming service." Neither of them gave it another thought as they continued their day. At Johns Hopkins University, a team of scientists led by Dr. Alan Porter had been tasked with analyzing the communication patterns in the alien message. They worked around the clock, feeding the data into quantum computers and comparing it with every known language pattern. "Their logic structures are different," Alan explained to his team. "They seem to process cause and effect in ways we don't. But the fascinating thing is, they clearly expected us to respond with fear or aggression." "And we didn't?" asked his assistant, Nicole Baker. "Not really," Alan smiled. "Most of humanity doesn't believe it's real, and those who do are more curious than afraid. That seems to be confusing them tremendously." President Martinez established a small, specialized task force combining military, scientific, and diplomatic experts. They set up in a secure facility beneath the Rocky Mountains, dubbed Project Assessment. "Our primary goal is to determine their capabilities and intentions," she told the team via secure video link. "If they truly have the technology to reach our solar system, we need to understand what we're dealing with." As night fell across America, most citizens went to bed untroubled by cosmic concerns. News channels had mostly relegated the alien message story to brief mentions between celebrity gossip and weather reports. Life continued normally. But up in space, the objects near Mars began to move, slowly and deliberately, towards Earth. Greg Nelson woke up at 5:30 a.m. like he did every morning for the past 30 years. The Iowa corn farmer stretched, put on his worn blue jeans and flannel shirt, and walked downstairs to make coffee. His border collie, Rusty, wagged his tail excitedly by the door. "Hold on, boy. Let me get my coffee first," Greg said with a yawn. The morning news played quietly on the small kitchen TV. There was some story about strange lights in the sky that scientists were investigating, but Greg wasn't paying much attention. He had corn to check. After breakfast, Greg and Rusty headed out to the fields. The morning was cool and clear, dew still clinging to the tall corn stalks. Greg walked along the edge of his east field, checking for signs of pests or disease. Everything looked good until he reached the back 40 acres. "What in tarnation?" he muttered. A large circular area of corn had been flattened. In the center sat what could only be described as a spacecraft. It was about the size of a school bus, metallic silver, with strange blue lights pulsing along its sides. Greg stopped and stared, Rusty growling softly beside him. "Easy, boy," Greg said, patting the dog's head. "Let's go see what's what." As Greg approached, a section of the craft slid open. 3 beings emerged. They stood about 4 feet tall with grayish-blue skin, oversized heads, and 4 arms each. They wore what looked like armor made of a material that shifted colors in the sunlight. Greg stopped about 20 feet away. "Morning," he called out, tipping his cap slightly. "You folks are on private property." The aliens froze, seemingly shocked by his casual greeting. They looked at each other, then back at Greg. One of them stepped forward and raised a device that emitted a soft humming sound. "Human," it said in a strangely accented but understandable English. "Do you not recognize a war vessel of the Galactic Council?" Greg scratched his chin. "Can't say that I do." "Is that some kind of new government program?" The alien's large eyes blinked rapidly. "The Galactic Council has declared war on your species. We are an advanced scout team assessing your defenses." "War?" Greg frowned. "Nobody told me about any war, and you're standing in my cornfield." The aliens conferred among themselves in high-pitched clicks and whistles. They seemed confused and increasingly agitated. "Your species was officially notified through your planetary authorities," the lead alien insisted. "The notification period has passed. You should be mobilizing your defenses." Greg shrugged. "Well, I don't know anything about that. But you flattened about an acre of my best corn, so someone's going to have to pay for that." The aliens once again huddled together, clearly bewildered by this response. Meanwhile, Greg pulled out his phone and took a picture. "Mind if I get a selfie with you folks? My grandson Billy loves space stuff." Before the aliens could respond, a truck rumbled down the dirt road toward them. It was Sam Tucker, Greg's neighbor. Sam pulled up and rolled down his window. "Hey, Greg, what's going on?" Then he noticed the spacecraft and aliens. "Whoa, is this one of them movie productions?" "Nah," Greg replied casually. "These fellas say they're from some galactic council. Apparently, they're at war with us." Sam laughed. "Is that right? Well, they picked a bad time. Harvest season's coming up, and I ain't got time for no interstellar conflict." He turned to the aliens. "You boys want some coffee? Martha made a fresh pot." The alien representatives looked at each other in what appeared to be total confusion. Their mission parameters had not prepared them for this reaction. They had expected panic, military response, or at least recognition of the gravity of the situation. Instead, they got an Iowa farmer worried about his corn and offering to take selfies. By afternoon, news of the alien landing had spread through the county. Locals came by to see the visitors, many bringing food and taking pictures. Most assumed it was an elaborate prank or marketing stunt. No one seemed particularly concerned about the war declaration. The scout ship left after 24 hours, thoroughly confused by humanity's response. The Galactic Council war fleet moved into position around Earth's moon, their massive ships gleaming in the sunlight. Admiral Skithrix, supreme commander of the punitive forces, stood on the bridge of the flagship Inevitable Victory, his 4 tentacles clasped behind his back as he surveyed the small gray satellite. "The humans have established a base on this lifeless rock," he informed his officers. "Our intelligence suggests it houses 12 of their scientists. We will eliminate this outpost as our first demonstration of power." His second-in-command, a tall insectoid being named Vice Admiral Crixus, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Is that sufficient, Admiral?" Their response to our scout team was unexpected. "They simply don't understand the gravity of their situation," Admiral Skithrix replied. "Once we destroy their lunar base, they will comprehend our superiority." On the moon, at Lunar Station Alpha, The 12 researchers were going about their normal routines. Dr. Beth Adams was collecting lunar soil samples when the emergency alarm blared through her helmet. "All personnel, return to base immediately," commanded the voice of Station Director Carl Duncan. "This is not a drill. We have multiple unidentified objects approaching." The researchers quickly made their way back to the station, where they gathered in the control room. The main screen showed several enormous vessels moving toward them. "I'm getting some weird energy readings," said Engineer Paul Howard, studying his monitors. "Like nothing I have ever seen before." Suddenly, a brilliant beam of light shot from the largest alien ship, striking the lunar surface about half a mile from the station. The ground shook, and dust billowed up in the vacuum. "Evacuation Protocol Alpha," Director Duncan shouted. "Everyone to the emergency shuttle. Now." The team moved quickly, grabbing only essential research data before boarding the small shuttle docked at the back of the station. Paul lingered behind for a few extra seconds, downloading sensor data about the attack. As the shuttle lifted off, they watched through the viewports as another beam hit the station, vaporizing parts of it instantly. The shuttle shook violently from the shockwave, but its engines pushed on, carrying them away from the moon toward Earth. "That was close," Dr. Adams said, her voice shaking slightly. Paul was already analyzing the data he'd gathered. "These weapons, they're operating on principles we've barely theorized about. They're manipulating gravitational fields somehow." Back on Earth, news of the attack reached President Martinez immediately. The emergency task force gathered in the Situation Room. "All lunar personnel are safe," General Taylor reported. "But we've lost the station." "Options?" the President asked. Defense Secretary Eleanor Reed cleared her throat. "Conventional military response would be ineffective against this level of technology. We need to try something unexpected." "Like what?" someone asked. "Like showing them humans don't think like other species," Secretary Reed said. "I recommend we send a trade delegation." The room fell silent for a moment. "A trade delegation," the President repeated. "They just attacked our moon base." "Yes," Reed nodded, "and they probably expected us to launch missiles or something equally futile. Let's surprise them." 24 hours later, a modified space shuttle approached the alien fleet. Inside, astronaut Samantha Miller sat with a team of diplomats and scientists. In the cargo hold was a selection of Earth's most popular foods, music, art, and cultural artifacts. "Alien vessels, this is Captain Samantha Miller of the United States of America. Earth. We come bearing gifts and trade proposals," she transmitted. On the bridge of the inevitable Victory, Admiral Skithrix nearly dropped his command tablet in shock. "They're sending trading representatives. After we destroyed their moon base," he sputtered. "They also appear to be broadcasting cooking shows to our fleet," Vice Admiral Crixus added, looking equally confused. The shuttle docked with the flagship. When the airlock opened, Samantha stepped forward with a smile, carrying a thermal container. "We thought you might like to try coffee and pizza," she said to the assembled alien officers. "They're kind of Earth specialties." Admiral Skithrix stared at the humans, completely lost for words. This was not in any military protocol he had ever studied. The Supreme War Council had not prepared him for humans offering food after an attack. "Your weapons are interesting," Paul Howard said, joining Samantha. "We'd love to discuss the physics behind them. Maybe we could share some ideas." The aliens looked at each other in growing confusion. This was not how war was supposed to work. Dr. Kevin Lopes hadn't slept in 3 days. The xenolinguist sat in his makeshift office at NASA headquarters, surrounded by screens displaying alien language patterns. Empty coffee cups littered his desk. His eyes were red from staring at the strange symbols for hours on end. "I've got it," he whispered suddenly, sitting up straight. "I finally got it." He grabbed his phone and called the head of Project Indifference, General Lisa Carter. "General, I've decoded more of their communications. You need to see this immediately." 2 hours later, Dr. Lopes stood before a room of military leaders and scientists, explaining his discovery. The Galactic Council species don't just speak different languages. He explained, pointing to his charts. They think fundamentally differently than we do. Their brains evolved in environments with much less diversity and change than Earth. He clicked to the next slide showing comparative evolutionary trees. Most council species developed on worlds with stable conditions, minimal seasonal variations, few natural disasters, limited temperature ranges. Their psychology reflects this stability. They'd value predictability and uniformity. General Carter leaned forward. And humans? We're their worst nightmare, Dr. Lopes said with a slight smile. We evolved on a planet that's constantly trying to kill us. Ice ages, volcanoes, hurricanes, droughts. We adapted to survive extreme variations. To them, our ability to thrive in such conditions is terrifying. It's like meeting a person who can comfortably drink poison. Meanwhile, aboard the Galactic Council flagship, strange developments were unfolding. Several alien species had begun requesting private meetings with the human delegation, bypassing official channels. Ambassador Lily Rodriguez found herself meeting with representatives from 12 different species in secret corners of the massive ship. Your food is intense, said a jellyfish-like being called Glox after trying a jalapeno potato chip. How do you survive consuming such chemical weapons? It's just a snack, Lily explained. Some humans prefer even spicier foods. Glox's translucent body flickered with lights that the translator indicated meant amazement and fear. Back on Earth, defense contractor Susan Williams led a team studying the alien technology from debris collected near the moon. Their weapons are advanced but based on completely different principles than ours, she explained to her team. They use energy manipulation methods we've never considered because they developed in low radiation environments. Susan sketched a diagram on the whiteboard. They assume any species would develop similar technology paths because they've never encountered a species that evolved on a death world like Earth. But our different evolutionary history led us to different technological solutions. Her colleague, engineer Ray Johnson, looked up from a strange alien device. So they're incredibly advanced in some ways, and surprisingly limited in others, Susan finished. Their ships can travel faster than light, but they're vulnerable to radiation levels we encounter daily on Earth. On the flagship, division was growing among the Council species. Admiral Thrix called an emergency meeting of the War Council. The humans are not responding according to any known conflict protocol, he announced, frustration evident in his vibrating gill slits. Instead of mobilizing their military, they're inviting our soldiers to what they call barbecues and movie nights. Their entertainment broadcasts are disturbing, added cultural analyst Virtu. They simulate death, disaster, and violent conflict for amusement. They expose themselves to these images voluntarily. A low-ranking communications officer named Plix raised a tentacle hesitantly. They've begun streaming their daily lives to our ships. 17 million of our citizens are now watching humans doing ordinary tasks. The cooking channels are particularly popular. Admiral Skithrix slammed his tentacle on the table. This is unprecedented. We declared war. They're supposed to be afraid. In the corner of the room, the representative of the ancient Merg species, the oldest council member, made a sound that approximated laughter. Perhaps, the elder Merg said slowly, we have encountered something truly new, a species that evolved in chaos rather than order. They do not fear what they do not understand. They're curious about it. The ancient being's eyes glowed softly. How fascinating. Across the galaxy, Council citizens were becoming increasingly captivated by humans. Live streams from Earth were the most watched content in Council space. Alien children were asking their parents for Earth foods and mimicking human gestures. The war was not going according to plan. In fact, it wasn't going like a war at all. UN Ambassador Ryan Murphy had never expected to travel to an alien spacecraft as part of his job. Yet here he was, sitting in a shuttle approaching the massive flagship of the Galactic Council's war fleet. The ship was larger than Manhattan, its surface covered with strange patterns that seemed to shift and change as they approached. "Nervous?" asked his aide, Olivia Wright. Ryan adjusted his tie and smiled. "No more than when I negotiated with North Korea last year." The shuttle docked with a soft thud. When the door opened, they were greeted by a delegation of alien representatives from 7 different species. The variety was stunning. Some had tentacles, others wings, one appeared to be made of crystalline structures, and another looked like a floating cloud of gas. "Welcome aboard the Sovereign Judgment," said Admiral Skithrix, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. "You are the first humans to officially visit our council chambers." Ryan nodded politely. "We appreciate the invitation. Earth looks forward to resolving our misunderstanding." The aliens led the human delegation through corridors that seemed impossibly large and complex. They passed members of dozens of different species, many of whom stopped to stare at the humans with obvious curiosity. The council chamber itself was a vast circular room with hundreds of elevated platforms arranged in tiers. Representatives from countless worlds filled the seats, creating a dizzying array of shapes, colors, and sounds. High Chancellor Vortic addressed the assembled council. "We have convened this extraordinary session to address the human question. Ambassador Murphy will now speak." Ryan walked to the central platform, which rose slightly as he stepped onto it. He looked around at the gathered representatives of 317 spacefaring civilizations and took a deep breath. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I come before you not as an enemy, but as a neighbor. It seems we have startled you by our very existence." A murmur ran through the chamber. "From what we've learned," Ryan continued, "most council species evolved on worlds very different from Earth. Stable worlds with predictable conditions. Earth is not like that. Our planet has wild temperature swings, radiation, natural disasters, and countless other challenges." He displayed images of Earth's varied environments, from Arctic wastes to burning deserts, from stormy seas to volcanic mountains. These conditions shaped humanity. We adapted not by developing perfect biological solutions to specific problems, but by becoming flexible problem solvers. We survived by changing, by being curious, by working together to overcome challenges. The council members watched in silence as Ryan showed humans living in all these extreme environments. "You called Earth a death world," Ryan said, "but to us, it's simply home. And while we may seem strange to you, we see the incredible diversity of the council with wonder and excitement. We don't want war. We want to learn from you, trade with you, and perhaps offer new perspectives you haven't encountered before." After Ryan's speech, the council erupted in discussion. Species that had never spoken directly to each other were now debating the human question. Some were fascinated, others remained fearful, but all were engaged. In a private chamber afterward, Ryan met with the council's executive committee. Chancellor Vortic seemed thoughtful. "Your species is indeed unique in our experience," the chancellor admitted. "Perhaps our declaration of war was premature. I believe we can offer each other much more as friends than as enemies," Ryan replied. The Merg elder, who had remained silent until now, spoke slowly. "In 10,000 years of council history, we have never encountered a species that evolved as yours did. Your adaptability could bring new ideas to our ancient civilization." By the end of the 3-day visit, a framework for peace had been established. The war declaration would be formally withdrawn, replaced by a cultural exchange protocol. Earth would open its first interstellar embassy in orbit around Jupiter, where aliens could acclimate to being closer to what they considered a death world. As Ryan prepared to return to Earth, Admiral Skithrix approached him. "Ambassador," the Admiral said, "I must confess I still don't fully understand humans. You faced the combined might of 317 advanced civilizations and responded by offering us pizza." Ryan laughed. "Sometimes the best way to turn an enemy into a friend is to share a meal." As the shuttle departed, Ryan looked back at the massive alien fleet. What had begun as a war declaration was transforming into one of the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs in human history. And most people on Earth were still going about their daily lives, only vaguely aware that anything unusual was happening in space. 6 months after the Galactic Council's declaration of war, Earth had changed in subtle but profound ways. Regular shuttle flights now connected the planet to the massive alien space stations orbiting Jupiter. Humanity had joined the stars not through conquest or defense, but through what historians were already calling the war that never was. In San Diego, a small restaurant called Stellar Tacos had become the most famous eatery on the planet. Its owner and head chef was none other than former Galactic Council War Admiral Scythrix, who had resigned his military commission to pursue his newfound passion for Earth cuisine. The combination of flavors is unlike anything in known space, Scythrix explained to a food critic, his 4 tentacles skillfully assembling tacos with practiced precision. Human food contains more distinct chemical compounds than any other species' cuisine. It is revolutionary. The line outside Stellar Tacos wrapped around the block every day, filled with both humans and alien visitors eager to try the famous fusion dishes. Scythrix had become something of a celebrity, appearing on cooking shows and even starting a popular streaming channel. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, the newly established Department of Interstellar Relations occupied an entire floor. Diplomat Lily Rodriguez, who had been among the first humans to visit the Council flagship, now oversaw trade negotiations with 17 different alien species. Human adaptability has become our most valuable export, she explained to a group of business leaders. Council species evolved in stable environments and struggle with change. They're paying premium rates for human consultants who can help them solve problems in new ways. Companies across Earth were hiring xenobiologists and cultural experts to help them develop products for the galactic market. Simple human inventions like duct tape were selling for astonishing prices on alien worlds, while Earth imported advanced medical technologies and clean energy systems from the Council. In Iowa, farmer Greg Nelson's life had changed dramatically. The landing site where he had first encountered the alien scout ship was now a small spaceport, with regular shuttles arriving from across the galaxy. Greg himself had been appointed Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council, a position he accepted with his characteristic shrug. They asked me because I didn't freak out when I saw them, Greg explained to a reporter as he walked through his cornfields. Said they needed someone who was chill about the whole thing. So I split my time between the farm and the council meetings. His simple, straightforward approach to diplomacy had proven surprisingly effective with the often formal council species. Greg's habit of bringing homemade pies to negotiations had become legendary in diplomatic circles. In schools across Earth, children now studied xenobiology alongside traditional subjects. Elementary school students learned basic phrases in the most common alien languages, while high schoolers could take electives in interstellar trade or comparative exobiology. At Harvard University, Dr. Kevin Lopes taught the first ever class on psycholinguistic bridges between Earth and Council species. His classroom was filled with both human students and visiting aliens who wanted to understand each other better. The biggest misconception the Council had about us was that our biology made us aggressive, Dr. Lopes explained to his class. In reality, evolving on a challenging planet made us collaborative and innovative. We had to work together and try new approaches to survive. The military tensions that had initially marked relations between Earth and the Council had faded almost completely. The massive war fleet had been repurposed as a scientific and cultural exchange armada, with most ships now hosting mixed crews of humans and various council species. President Martinez addressed the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 6-month anniversary of first contact. On the stage beside her stood representatives from 27 council worlds. What began as a declaration of war has become a declaration of mutual curiosity, she said. Humanity has always looked to the stars with wonder. Now we know those stars were looking back at us with the same feeling. As night fell over Earth, Millions of people looked up at the sky, knowing it was no longer empty and mysterious. The galaxy had opened to humanity not through conflict, but through humanity's most distinctive trait: the casual, almost indifferent ability to adapt to whatever the universe threw at them. And somewhere in deep space, the Galactic Council was still trying to figure out how a species could respond to a formal war declaration by offering tacos and Netflix subscriptions.